Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Time once again for Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Phil and I still on location. Phil on vacation, and I'm just in the office, a different office.
different office location.
Yeah. But this week, Phil, we're going to talk about this article that came out from Kiplinger, and we'll put a link to it in the show descriptions down below. It's the 5 Ds of retirement planning, 5 keys to a retirement plan that may actually hold up. So I want to talk about some of these, get your take as somebody who's in the trenches and doing this every day and working with folks. So let's break this down a little bit and see how you feel about it, okay?
Sure. Sounds good.
So we got the links down in the show descriptions below, so you can go check this out for yourself and see if you're on, see how your 5Ds stack up. So we're going to start with
the 5D stack. Yeah.
Well, we're going to start with diversification. We're doing diversification with technology. Phil's got like 3 different ways he's connected, trying to connect to me out there in the sticks. So hopefully,
when you're working remotely, you got to figure out
right.
which one works best.
That's right. So hopefully this one works. Diversification, clearly this makes a lot of sense. So, a top D, if you will. And so what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, diversification has always been kind of a staple in investing, right? The old asset allocation, stock bond, is typically how people think of diversification. But as you get to retirement, a couple of things change, right? So in general, diversification, again, at that high level, you've got your equities, the stock, that's the more aggressive, more risky side of the portfolio. Yeah. You've got your bond, the fixed income, so to speak, and that's generally the more conservative side of the portfolio, although not always. We have seen sometimes more recently, actually, with interest rates rising, where the bond side of the portfolio did not hold up well. It does not like rising interest rates.
Right.
But at a high level, kind of those are the 2 components, and obviously many subcomponents of those as you get into the asset allocation. But when you're investing for retirement, that accumulation phase, most people look at that diversification and might apply whatever that asset allocation is. So let's call it this, the kind of standby 60-40 portfolio, and you apply that asset allocation to all the accounts. When you get into retirement, though, the way we look at it is we change it up a little bit in that we might still look at a high level, that 60-40 portfolio, if that's what the comfort level is of the client. But now we want to segregate those where we might have the more aggressive side of that strategy, the 60%, the equity side. We'll have that in our later bucket because that's long-term growth. We want that. We need that actually for long-term growth to keep up with inflation. And this is a way to hedge against that downside that comes with that side of the portfolio, as you go through the ups and downs in the market, because that's the later bucket. We're not going to need it for 10 or more years. The soon bucket, that's where we want to position the more conservative side of the portfolio. So that's, for us, how we, as an asset allocation, look at diversification, especially as we get into retirement.
And that makes sense. A lot of times people often think about diversification, and especially if they're doing this on their own and they're like, hey, I bought 5 mutual funds from 5 different companies, so I'm diversified. And it's like, you probably have a lot of overlap. You're probably all in large cap, that, so you're not really diversified.
By the time you drill into those, you realize that probably 70% of the holdings are going to be very similar. So another point of diversification, so that's kind of the traditional thought of diversification, is as you think of your asset allocation, stocks, bonds. But there's another side of diversification that applies, especially as you get into retirement, and that's from a tax aspect. So we've talked many times about the 3 different tax buckets of investments that you can have, your taxable investments, tax deferred. So taxable is going to be your traditional brokerage account or money in the bank. It's after-tax money has gone in. The interest, dividends, capital gains, the growth on that, you pay tax on each year.
Yeah.
Your tax deferred bucket, that middle bucket, that's pre-tax money in. All the growth is tax deferred. So these are your traditional IRAs, 401ks, RSPs. There's many different names for them, but it's a traditional retirement account. And then the third one is going to be your tax-free bucket. This is after-tax money in. Growth is now tax-free as long as you follow the rules. So Roth IRAs is a great example there, Roth 401k. So there's the other side of diversification that we look at is where are your assets positioned? For most retirees, unfortunately, a lot of them sometimes all of them are sitting in that middle bucket, that tax deferred bucket, which may have been favorable from a tax standpoint all these years as you've accumulated, but all you've done is kicked that can down the road, so to speak, from a tax aspect. So,
Yeah.
so that's the other side you really need to start thinking of is, how is my diversification amongst those buckets as you get into retirement, so you have more flexibility and control as it comes to taxes?
Yeah, no, it's a great point as well, because I was just getting ready to say, it's like, don't forget about tax diversification as well. We tend to think of, diversification as just the portfolio side, but think about the tax side as well. All right, so that's the first D. Really, I'm not sure why the second D was not the first D, but that's okay. Duration is the next one. So obviously, the number one thing that just about everybody says, pretty much 99% across the board is, will my money last as long as I do? So the duration of your funds is important, clearly.
Yeah. So, this is where having that strategy up front is key. You have to run the math up front to make sure you have a plan to see, number one, does your plan for retirement, does it work, right? Do you have enough assets? Because, if you're starting out, we talked on our last show about the Dave Ramsey 8%, so if you're starting out with this grandiose thing of, well, we're going to spend, 8% of our portfolio every year, that might feel real good for 5 or 10 years, but all of a sudden you get, 10, 12 years into retirement and it's not working. Now what? Now you've damaged the portfolio in such a way that you're going to have to dramatically change lifestyle. So we don't want to have that happen. Our goal is to let's have a reasonable strategy and plan up front to, first of all, make sure that the money lasts. So, and there's a lot of ways that we can, work around building in that duration, especially if that's something you're really nervous about. There's a lot of ways to generate guaranteed income, so we can somewhat remove that concern from the equation.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of the Tax Smart Retiree right now.
So, Phil, we're talking about these 5 Ds, and the next one is downside protection. Okay. So we certainly want our money to last as long as we do, right? With the duration, we need it to be diversified, as we talked about, but we also got to think about some downside protection. And let me just have a little fun here with you on this for a second. So, recently the Dow just popped 53,000. It's cooled off at the time we're taping this one today. It's just a tad under that again, but it's kind of gone over. So pulling up the 5-year window on the Dow over what it's done the last 5 years, it is up 51% in the last 5 years. So somebody might go, I got $1 million, I got it in indices, use the S&P, use the Dow, whatever. 50%.
And you just doubled your money.
50%. Yeah. Wow, I've got $1.5 million. Sure, if you're completely at risk, right?
No.
So, and that's the point of downside protection, the conversations. That's so sexy and it's so enticing, Phil, but it is not. It is not smart. If you are 35, that's one thing. If you are 45, maybe it's still one thing. But at 50 plus, it's a whole other animal. So downside protection has to be an important D in your strategy.
Yeah, this really kind of plays back into that duration side. The downside protection becomes more important as you reach retirement because you no longer have this long time horizon. When you're in your 30s, you're saving for retirement. If you're comfortable with that kind of volatility, go for it, right? As long as you don't touch the money, those are quote unquote paper losses. No, they don't feel like paper losses when you're going through it, right? It's pretty painful. But the reality is historically, markets have recovered, so you have, but the point is you have time. You have time to not touch the money, let it ride through this up and down, and you're going to get closer to that average. When you get to retirement though, you don't have that option, right? You're spending from that money. So you have to have some hedge of how are you going to handle these downsides in a market so that it doesn't affect your plan. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about it again many times in the show, but our strategy is by segregating money, by bucketizing the money. So we'll have some more growth aggressive type strategies, but that's in a later bucket where we have time. We bought our time now so we can ride through those ups and downs, because you need that for that long-term growth to be able to keep up with inflation. But that can't be all of the money. And as enticing as it is, you need to still have money in a more conservative strategy that is going to hedge against these downsides, because you're living from that money at this point, right? So you can't afford to take a 20, 30, 40, 50%, whatever those drops may be, that kind of a loss, and then have it recover.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and by the way, for comparison, the S&P over 5 years is up 74%, right? So even crazier sounding. And again, it's easy. The whole FOMO, we've talked about that a billion times. Even no matter what age you are, we sit here and we go, look, other than a few blips here and there, for the last better part of 17, 18 years, the market's been on a tear. But remember, you've also gained a lot. Even if you haven't been 100% exposed to this the entire time, you've done pretty well, most likely, right? So be careful.
Well, and the other side of this too, especially for retirees, is as enticing as it is, what do you need?
Right.
What kind of a return do you need? Do you really need to get? I mean, we'd all love to have 10%,
75%,
15% average returns. I mean, that's awesome. But do you need it? And if you don't need that kind of a return, and hopefully when you're at the point of retirement, you don't need it, because if you do, then there's probably some things you need to fix, because you shouldn't be basing it on those kind of returns. But the reality is, once you get to that point, you've got your number. You've made it. As enticing as it is to, let's roll the dice and go. The markets are great. What's the point? Why? Do you really want to put things at risk just to chase this return that, it's been there for 5 years. It's been great, but we're riding a lot of technology and AI. And I mean, at some point things are going to turn. It's part of what markets do.
Well, you asked the question, do you need it? So that brings us to the next D, discretionary income. Okay. So this trips up a lot of people. It's very easy when they go see a financial advisor for the first time. And I've been talking to advisors for 10 years, Phil. I've been talking with folks like yourself all across the country, and almost every single time, and every single one I've talked with, at this point, probably 1,000. It's people will come in and they say, here's what we need to get by on. Here's what we need to make our plan go. It's $3,000 a month, or it's $5,000 a month. And most of the time it doesn't include the discretionary income. It's the big ticket items, right? So how do you plan and help people with this particular D?
Well, it's again, having that discussion and that plan up front. And we like to segregate the discretionary, especially those big ticket items. So travel is probably the most common one. So we'll have clients, as we're planning out, it's like, well, what does it cost to just live comfortably in retirement?
It's a nickel and dime world too, right? So you got to factor all that stuff in.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, that's a funny thing in our workshops that we've done. We hand out a budget worksheet, so to speak, to have clients kind of work through and figure out, well, we spend this much on, all the various categories, and then you add it up and it's like, well, but it says we're only spending $50,000 a year, but you made $150,000 last year.
Where is it?
The savings account didn't increase, so where did it go?
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it, is that we just don't realize how much we spend, especially if you try to sit down and ballpark and put in these categories. So it's kind of shocking.
Do you use the tax returns to help, kind of facilitate that in?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's ultimately what we come back to is kind of our safeguard, so to speak, is that's reality. Is we'll look at the last couple of years' tax returns and figure, well, here's the gross income. This is what you were reported, right? Minus taxes that you paid. So your Social Security, your Medicare, federal and state taxes, local taxes, any income taxes that you paid. And then that's your net spendable income. And out of that is, already come your 401k contribution. Yeah. If it's Roth, then we'll take that away.
Gotcha.
Then that net number we end up with it can only go two places. You either spent it or you saved it. And if you can't point to an account, an investment, or a bank account that has grown because you're making regular contributions to it, then you spent it.
Yeah.
And that's lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, and this is one of those things that it's easy as you get into retirement planning to underestimate. And if you underestimate this, your plan might look really good. But ultimately when you get into retirement and you say, we only need, $60,000 a year, but then you get into retirement and that first year you spent 80.
Yeah. Well, to my point, Phil, right? I mean, so like even with our 4% conversation, somebody can come in with the back of the napkin and say, I got $1 million in my account, in my retirement accounts. We only need $3,000 a month to make this fly. With Social Security, we're bringing in, $3,500. So we can pull 4% at 40,000. Like you can do all that back of the napkin. Mm-hmm. But if that $3,000 a month you need to get by on is way off by, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000, you've just jacked up this whole equation, something fierce, right?
Yeah. It no longer works,
so,
right?
Yeah, you got to dial it in specifically. And that really comes to the last and the final D here, Phil, for this week. And it's drag. Because, and it's drag is anything that drags down the scenario, that doesn't make it work. Inflation, right. Too much spending, whatever the case might be, it's a drag. It sucks, but you got to get it done.
Well, right? and taxes is probably the biggest drag that most people don't think of because back to the scenario, you need $5,000 a month, let's say. Well, okay, so where's that money coming from? If it's coming from a brokerage account, well, that's $5,000. That's what you pull. It's, that distribution from the brokerage account in and of itself isn't taxable. Now, you might have realized some gains if you had to sell something. So a small portion of that may be taxable. But if you need $5,000 and you're pulling that from an IRA, well, that's a whole different scenario because now it's no longer $5,000. You're needing to pull $7,000, $8,000, depending on what your tax bracket is and, what state you live in to net your $5,000.
Right.
So that's where understanding the tax component really comes into play. And back to that first D, that diversification, because if we have the tax buckets set up properly, we have more control of what that tax drag is.
Yeah. So, get your D's in order, right? So
get the D's in order.
Yeah, this is all important stuff. This was a great article. It works. It makes a lot of sense. Again, we'll link it to in the show descriptions down below. Apple, Spotify, and of course YouTube is where you can find us to subscribe to the show in whatever form you like using. If you want to watch our little faces, or if you want to listen to just our voices, however you want to go. But it's important to have a strategy. It's important to talk with somebody who's a professional who does this day in and day out and has helped hundreds of thousands of folks, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands of people get to and through retirement. Reach out to qualified professionals like Phil. Of course, Phil is here to help. He serves clients all over the country as well, not just in his backyard in the Michigan area. But if you need that help, find him online at philstaxhacks.com. That's the podcast website, but it also redirects back to his main website. And we have links for all that stuff in the show descriptions below anyway, philstaxhacks.com. And Phil, great stuff, man. Thanks for breaking this down. I always appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Have a good day and enjoy the rest of your vacation. I will let you actually spend the rest of your vacation having fun. We'll get back to work in the office in a couple of weeks. Take care. Enjoy the holidays, folks. Enjoy the summertime. And remember to enjoy retirement a little bit as well. Not just save for it, but actually enjoy it. And we'll see you.
Enjoy it. Yep.
We'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts.
Phil? Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.